So as Michael told you, this is all about implementing the IPGs. And I want us to really be cognizant about our engagement today. I may ask you to come off mute and share or be in the chat a lot. This is your gift of time with your peers. This is really that opportunity of collaboration to learn from each other. So just like with anything else we do, you get out of it what you put into it. So let's get a lot out of today's session. Our agenda is just as Michael's already told you, we're going to do and have an overview of the really implementing the IPG. And we're going to start with an overview of Acceleration for All. We're going to give you an overview of those instructional practice guides, probably just knowledge building. I don't think we'll get to foundational skills. We might, but we're going to really dig into knowledge building for sure. Thinking about using that, thinking about those before, during, and after moves with IPG walks, and then possibly get to that foundational skills, and then just go over some quick supports for implementation. So, these are just our some norms, really thinking about, feel free to ask questions. This is a place where you can get out of it whatever you want to. Ask those questions, be present and fully engaged. Really thinking about considering those differing perspectives. This is just our safe place for professional learning. I know you're probably in your building, so just thinking about monitoring the tech use and just being as engaged as you possibly can. And again, feel free to come off mute and ask questions. If I don't know, I'm a true educator at heart. I will beg, borrow, and steal to find the answer for you if I don't know. So first, we're going to review the role of monitoring in the cycles of continuous improvement. We're thinking about, with Acceleration for All, our current role right now, we're thinking about going and seeing instruction that students are engaging with as part of their classroom experiences. It's just that important. It's important to go and see if that vision that you have in your school is playing out in your classrooms. So the theory around Acceleration for All is that we believe that with attention to all students, it is possible to achieve excellence in literacy education. So if you have not had any of the asynchronous trainings or the join any of the school leader calls, these are the three components, the core components essential to Acceleration for All. Really to ensure that every student is able to successfully access strong Tier 1 instruction. So we have cycles of continuous improvement. We'll talk a little bit more about those in a minute. Really utilizing some individual strengths as well as the needs through student work analysis, and then the use of those IEPs, ILPs if necessary. And those things can be that key insight for instructional shifts. We're also thinking about how are we involving all stakeholders to high quality instructional material implementation, really thinking about how are we helping that day be cohesive across the tiers, across the whole day for our students. And then this last piece that we're introducing and playing out this year is really monitoring that access. How are all of our students provided access to Tier 1 instruction? And that was the addition of Core Action 4 on the IPG. So as we really thinking about how can we realize that vision of increased achievement for all students, we can support teachers and students through cycles of continuous improvement. And the cycles are really that vehicle for support of educators in knowing their materials and knowing their IPGs. The IPG is a guidance tool, not a gotcha tool. So it really is that support of educators. So as we think about the end of each cycle, you have to start somewhere. Where's our entry point? We reflect. What has our IPG data told us? What is our student data telling us? How are we determining a focus that's going to shape that next lesson prep? It's really essential when we're thinking about these reflections that we are not just looking at a small portion of our students. We're looking at all students. We're ensuring that there is representation from SPED and ESL supports. How are the supports cohesive? And really thinking about district leadership along with instructional supervisors, along with our school leaders, really reflecting on that data to determine what that shared next piece of shared learning is. What is it? How are we determining what our PD days consist of, what our prep cycles look like? And then we do have that shared learning. We really think about how we are getting them together to think about how we can intentionally intellectually prep for all of our students. So that shared learning is where we can bring special ed, ESL, and general ed teachers together from across the district to really experience what does a lesson prep look like? What does a collaborative lesson prep based on IPG indicators and student data look like? And then we can move to the heart of that cycle where there really are those multiple iterations of lesson prep and student work analysis. So this is the heart of shifting the practices and really improving learning from all. So we're providing that shared learning. Hey, this focus from the, we've determined that this is the focus. We're going to share this prep protocol with you, this prep guidance with you, sit side by side with you, show you how to use it, and then have those multiple iterations while you're prepping those lessons. You're determining what work you would want to see, what work will show you that the students are actually doing the learning, since we're in that business of teaching and learning, bringing that back, analyzing that, what instructional shifts need to happen next, and really just support that work. We are thinking about how, as school leaders, we can go in and see, is what we're prepping playing out in the classroom? And then what does that feedback look like that is coaching our teachers up and helping all of our students really have that access to that high quality tier 1 instruction, where if we're looking at the knowledge building IPG, those high quality texts are at the center of instruction. We have that effective use of questions, tasks, and then we get to those important opportunities for student engagement, building up to core action 4, where is the access for all students, by really incorporating some intentional and targeted scaffolds that are truly just in time and not just in case. The ultimate goal is we're really leading to that ownership and success for all students with text and tasks. So that's a really long way to describe the HQI cycle of continuous improvement, along with Acceleration for All, which is our vehicle. And again, these multiple iterations down here, this was the latest edition, that lesson prep and student work. It's not just once, we're not just lesson prepping and doing a student work analysis once a quarter, that we really are considering how our instructional moves are impacting those student outcomes along the way with that student work. So why was the HQM cycle of continuous improvements chosen to be that vehicle for our work with Acceleration for All? It's aimed to help build confident and skilled educators by really providing those strategic opportunities for growth and learning. If we think about what it entails, the shared learning, the collaborative prep with multiple stakeholders, really getting more people at the table to consider what is best for all students. That cycle of continuous improvement also really places students at the center. I mean, that is what we are in the business of, is teaching and learning. So it really places those students there and connects the high quality instructional materials specifically to the knowledge of our own students that we have in our building, as well as any individual and possible collective needs. So this really allows teachers and leaders to hone in on the best ways to leverage instruction using that high quality instructional material for that student learning, their specific students, your specific students in your schools. So let's discuss the purpose and use of the instructional practice guides. Instructional practice guides. Tools like the IPG, they're important for several reasons. One being that we always want to build a culture of continuous learning for all educators, regardless of what role you hold. We know that when we continue to learn about better ways that students learn and analyze data for what is effective, we can help our students grow. And really instilling that mindset of teachers prior to the start of teaching will pave a pathway of positive mindset to just never stop learning. That mindset that is driven to just never stop learning. How to be better for students and keeping those students always at the center. One of my favorite quotes by Jim Knight: when teachers stop learning, so do students. So again, that's back to those core components of Acceleration for All cycles of continuous improvement, which includes the IPG, really engaging all stakeholders in implementation, and then monitoring that access for all students with the addition of core action 4 and thinking about what's happening in your prep sessions for all students. How are we preparing for all students? So in order to ensure all students have access to grade level content, it really takes that strong core instruction. So although the IPG defines the vision for strong instruction, and although it is usually used in core instruction, These indicators, those indicators on the IPG are important for any type of instruction that students receive, even if they're receiving instruction in other settings. Strong core instruction is inclusive of all learners. And that means it not only gives all students access to that grade level content, but also leverages the high quality instructional materials in a way that provides access points to help scaffold learning for students that might struggle with that grade level content. So really thinking about the vision for literacy instruction, same with math. I know we now have a science IPG and a social studies. Those are the visions for those content area instruction across for all students. So for ELA, we have 2 instructional practice guides, one for foundational skills that we use for grades pre-K through 2, and one for building knowledge that we use pre-K through 12. We know that both of those are equally important to use as they essentially represent the 2 strands of the reading rope, the word recognition and language comprehension. If you're familiar with the reading rope, that's been around a while. We have those 2 different strands. So one without the other in K2 will not build a strong reader. So it is important to use both IPGs and use those IPGs in various ways, including norming on what strong instructional practices look and sound like. And that's why we're here today, to really think about what does that look like? What does that strong instructional practice look like when you're visiting? And what is the support you all can provide as school leaders? So when you all norm as a team on expectations, this allows the IPG to be used as a tool during learning walks to have those quality discussions on the instruction that we see, and then focusing on those strengths and then that area to grow that would drive that continued improvement, thinking about that mindset of constantly improving. The information gleaned from learning walks using the IPG can and should provide those teachers with that high quality feedback for just a next step to improve instruction. And really that positive feedback for what they need to continue doing. I'm a huge fan of praising what you want replicated. So if you go in and praise your bulletin boards, our bulletin boards are going to be better next time. But if we go in and praise our good instructional practices, then our good instructional practices are going to be better next time. So I'm a big fan of the positive and taking those moments to celebrate. And I love, Michael has put the links to the knowledge building and the foundational skills IPG both in the chat. We do have a landing page for all things acceleration for all as well that he's put in the chat if you want to follow up on any of that. So thinking about these ELA instructional practice guides, that IPG is part of that intellectual prep cycle, analyzing the student work, the prep, delivering instruction, IPG learning walk, getting the feedback, analyzing the student work and prep, and so on and so on. So on. It is a cycle, continuous cycle. As we think about using the IPG, teacher knowledge and understanding the IPGs may vary. It may have been rolled out very differently from district to district, from school to school. So using this as a tool to support teachers was the intent. Specialty teachers, such as special ed teachers, may not be as familiar with the tool as general ed teachers are. I think it's important for teachers to have that understanding of what the instructional vision looks like. Many, I have a couple of districts that have actually aligned their prep protocol with some of the language from the IPG, because that is the vision for literacy instruction and what some of the considerations we want to have as we connect to intellectual prep. So that may vary across your school, across your district as well. So the IPGs do support excellent literacy instruction in practice. And so they are slightly different, the two, but the actual design is very similar. So there is 5 parts now for the knowledge building and still the 4 parts for the foundational skills. So we're thinking about culture of learning, using our high quality instructional materials, our teacher actions or teacher moves, including that questioning and modeling, and then the student actions or student engagement, student practice, however you want to. I think most have shifted to student engagement, but that could be that student practice piece down there in the K2 foundational skills that we're really thinking about. So we're really going to orient you to the knowledge building tool first. Really think about the high level indicators of effective literacy instruction. We're not going to go through every indicator in detail, because the purpose is just to norm you on using the tool. It's not really to norm you on using the tool, but to give you a general sense of what strong literacy instruction looks like so that you can develop your own vision of excellent instruction and support others to be able to realize that vision within your school. Currently, Core Action 4 is only part of the Knowledge Building IPG. I do have some districts that have added Core Action 4 to foundational skills as well as math, just to ensure that students are getting access to Tier 1 instruction across all students. So that Core Action 4 has been added to in some districts. That's a district decision. But currently at the state level, it is only added to part of the Knowledge Building IPG. Okay, that was a lot of talking in a few minutes. So we have those big buckets: culture of learning, Core Action 1, Core Action 2, Core Action 3, and now 4 for some of our IPGs. So again, that is the vision for literacy instruction and can be used as that coaching tool, that collaboration tool that helps teachers and those who support teachers to see those literacy shifts in practice. Those first 3 core actions specifically call out those shifts: text complexity and text focused questions and tasks, as well as opportunities for student engagement. Core Action 4 identifies the shifts in lesson prep, collaboration, instructional practices that will ensure access to high quality instructional materials for all students. So those first 3, culture, Core Action 1, Core Action 2, and Core Action 3, really are that those supports to see those literacy shifts as we've shifted standards a few years ago. Core Action 4 is focused on access for all students. There is a look for us guide that we rolled out from Acceleration for All. Michael has put that in the chat for you. Thinking about that essential component, an essential component of this work is that these supports are grounded in your current students that you have, and really specific to Tier 1 instruction. So in order to do this effectively, teachers really have to collaboratively engage in student work analysis that informs their lesson prep. And if you all don't mind me sharing, I got to join a student work analysis session last week that all stakeholders were at the table. And it was very, you know me, you know I'm all about a happy heart. It made my heart happy to see all of those people involved in that. And as they were looking at the work, they had put that in mastery, partial mastery, non-mastery. And several of the students that were being served in ELL and as well as SPED fell in that mastery or the partial mastery, where at the beginning of the year they were really, it was not mastered at all. And so the instructional leader that was leading that, which was an assistant principal in that building, was actually able to call out and say, hey, what led to that? And it was really the collaboration. Those stakeholders had been coming all year, hearing how the Tier 1 instruction was being delivered and supporting that in the pullout. And the teacher started naming, after they got into the student work analysis and were thinking about what they needed to shift, they were like, you know, we've noticed some of these students are the first ones to answer. They're the first ones to really feel confident with this because they're getting some of that preloading, front loading. So it was just really nice to see that in action. And it was playing out as we had been in IPG walks and saw that. I would have never known, as an outsider, I would have never known anyone that was struggling. It just seemed like all students had access and were participating. So really thinking about that collaborative student work analysis and that really focused lesson prep cycle that we're going to dive into, those are really those key practices to get to that ownership. What I heard and saw play out last week in that session I got to join was that those students had greater ownership because there was more cohesion across their tiers. It was really nice to see. Now, I will say this, that district is trying really hard to get that scaled out. That was happening in one small space. So as we roll out Acceleration for All and try to consider how do we scale that to other areas, those are still considerations we have that we're thinking through and problem solving together. It was really nice to see. All right, let's dig into this. So could I get someone, I've talked a lot, could I get someone to come off mute and share this quote from Natalie Wexler for me, please?
The most important factor in determining whether readers can understand a text is how much relevant vocabulary or background knowledge they have.
Our standards are in service of building knowledge through these complex texts for our students. And so really helping them not only be able to read the text, we have our foundational skills that we're wanting them to be able to get the words off the page, but actually really be able to delve into those texts deeper and understand that and grow their vocabulary, grow that background knowledge. Those things live in the IPG. So we're going to get to use our chat again. So how familiar are you with using the IPG? And here are our categories. We're going to just put an A, B, C, or D in the chat. A is hardly familiar at all. B is vaguely or a bit familiar. C is generally pretty familiar. And D is well-versed and practiced. So go ahead and rate yourself. Just give me an idea of where we are. I've been on walks with a couple of you, so I know a couple of you are well versed and practiced. So I see lots of C's and D's. I see some A's and B's. I know we've got a variety of school leaders here on the call. So those of you that rated yourself those C's and D's, the A's and B's may have some questions for you all that boots on the ground with the IPG. Okay, so a good variety. Let's move on. Okay, so we're going to take a close look at the components of the knowledge building IPG. You're going to see similarities between the two later on, but you're going to notice those differences too. Knowledge building, again, is used in grades K-12. I want to reiterate that we can't just focus on the foundational skills in K2. We have to have both sides of the reading rope there. We really want to focus on both, even in K2. And then it is a K-12 all the way up through as the vision for high quality literacy instruction in a knowledge building lesson. Again, foundational skills is just skills lesson for those K2 folks. It really is important to use both. So because all grade levels use the knowledge building IPG, that's why we're going to spend more time digging into each core action. And there is some learning about the foundational skills IPG that we will link in the chat just a little bit later, but there is some of that available. So as you may have noticed, the tool is structured as a hierarchy so that the more foundational elements generally come first. So you check that kids are actually doing what is being asked of them. You got your culture of learning. Are they doing what's being asked of them? Then you check, okay, is what's being asked of them appropriate? Is the content, the text, grade level appropriate? Are the tasks appropriately challenging and standards aligned? And then finally, are students doing most of the thinking in the classroom? And that really leads down to that question 4, is there access for all to have student ownership of the tier 1 instruction? So we're really thinking about that hierarchy. Are they doing what they're asked? Is what they're asked high quality? How effective can those questions and tasks be? And then what are those opportunities for students to engage with those high quality texts, tasks? And then is that the majority of the students? Is that all of our students? So the culture indicators focus on this question. Is the classroom environment inclusive and supportive while expecting engagement for all? You to take a minute, read through those indicators. Again, Michael did put the IPG in the chat. I'm going to be quiet for a minute while you read those. When we're thinking about the culture of learning, there's a little bit of a nuance and a difference between culture or environment and then that culture of learning. So the culture of learning is specifically calling out the academic environment that not only prioritizes each student's learning experience, but also ensures that that time spent throughout the lesson is well organized and that time is spent in the most meaningful way to help all students stay engaged in the learning and be successful. Those expectations here is an important consideration. When you're engaged in learning walks and really evaluating that culture of learning, it's important to ask if high expectations are expected of all students and if that culture of learning creates an environment where this is possible. Would some of you that are well versed in the IPG, and I know I have some of you on this call, I've been with you, would you come off of mute and tell me what some of those important words that you focus on when you're looking for culture, or even it just anecdotally, tell me, I'd love for some of you all to share with your peers what you've learned along the way. So that it's not all just me talking. I want to hear you guys as well. Just in culture.
I would say the urgency, having a sense of urgency about how time is used. We, hear a lot that we don't have enough time, and time is always something that we can't make more of. So having a sense of urgency about how we're using that time is such an important aspect of teaching.
I agree completely. Would anyone love to add to that? I love that.
I don't have any expertise. Like I put A with this specific rubric. However, the rubric where I work, one part is like the students and teacher demonstrate a joy for learning. And I feel like when it comes to culture, right? Like you want a culture where it's mutual respect, because where there is no mutual respect, it's going to affect the outcome of student learning. So like having being able to like see the joy and relationships that are there that are part of that engagement, that also helps to make sure like students are learning.
Absolutely. I love it. That joy for learning through those positive relationships, when you see students that are really in that space where they can be vulnerable and they know that it's okay to be wrong, and then they're joyful about it. You can see that the teacher and the students have developed those relationships, that true learning can happen because we learn through mistakes. I mean, that is when we do our best learning. So having that mutual respect, having that joy for learning, and that teacher really knowing that learning, that's we're in the business of teaching and learning and having that. So I love culture is one of my favorite things to really stamp down. If you've been with me on walks, I take notes because my mind is not a steel trap. So I take those notes, and it's those notes of those wonderful things I'm seeing and those things that the teachers are doing. And sometimes I'm capturing what the students are saying and doing that the teacher may not be able to see, but like that she has created that culture, he or she has created that culture that is allowing those students to have those opportunities for that learning, for that positive, that it is looked at as a positive that they're learning. Thank you guys for sharing. I love that. As we move forward into core action 1, so we're thinking about, are they doing what's expected? Is that environment, that culture set up for learning? We're moving into core action 1. And so it is structured hierarchically such that, that those foundational elements are first. So again, are they doing what is being asked of them? And then we really think about what is being asked of them. Is that grade level appropriate? Does that text meet the complexity and rigor for the time of year? And that is with what core action 1 is about, that high quality texts are at the center of instruction. So I want you to take 1 minute and really think about core action 1. And I've got 2 questions for you. I want you to take a minute. I'll set my timer when I finish talking, and think about what stands out to you about this domain, or you can answer the questions and ask a question. What question do you have about this domain? So tell me you have 2 choices. 1, tell me what stands out to you about this core action 1, this domain, or ask a question about core action 1, either one. And I'm gonna set my timer for a minute to give everybody time to process and think. All right, go ahead and pop in the chat what stands out to you about correction one, or do you have a question about correction one? It. I'm seeing a trend majority, and that students are spending the majority of the time in a text. Ooh, thank you, Cody, for sharing. A big thing that teachers sometimes struggle with is B. The anchor texts are at or above grade level. Sometimes we struggle to let students struggle and want to water things down for them. Exactly. Love it. So it's really that they are spending that majority of the time. Ooh, and quote, it's reading, writing, or speaking about the text. Worthy of student times. I like that. Meaningful information, the service of building knowledge, not just busy work. Love it. Love it. Yeah, that majority and the students really spending that time with the complex text, grade level appropriate. And that's one thing as we go through calibration and as we go through walks and norm walks as teams, thinking about that a majority of the lesson is spent reading, writing, or speaking about the text. One of the questions you may add there as you calibrate is who? Who was spending the majority of the lesson? Who was gleaning the knowledge from that text? Was it the teacher? Or was it the students? Thinking about the who there has really been helpful for me. I also will say that a common misstep is that just having materials out is not an automatic yes. We can have the materials out and students can still not be spending the majority of the time reading, writing, or speaking. Really, that consideration to how students are engaging with the text. And I'm going to push a little bit, not more there, how students are engaging with the text, but how many of them are engaging with the text and how it is being used. I think we can really think about that. And I have been in a couple as we've grown more comfortable in calibrating and comfortable in norming as teams and really wanting to give that best feedback to teachers. I've been in a few places over the last couple of months that materials were out, but we were a no on correction one because of the way the materials were being used. They were not being used in the way that the majority of students were actually accessing the text or considering the text, speaking about the text. It was just a misstep. And so we were able to give feedback, and actually the feedback was not an individual feedback to educators. The feedback ended up landing in the prep, and how are we in prep as school leaders and district leaders helping teachers see how you are actually engaging students with the high quality text. So that was where the shared learning lived after that was, we need to go back and actually prepare for what and how we are going to use this text for the purpose, for the end outcome of the unit or the lesson, either one. So anything else anybody wants to add or have questions about core action one or add to? Noticings or wonderings that you may have had.
I definitely was thinking about, I didn't put it in the chat, I was thinking about the word majority. So I feel like that's kind of vague, right? Like, I feel like it could be a little bit more specific. Like, was it 90 to 100%? Was it like that way to really like hone in on, so you can kind of have like a better common perspective, I guess, of what it is.
I love that you brought that out, Sarah. So I think I will, if I get the vendor wrong, I apologize, but I believe it's TNTP that put out the calibration questions. And I believe they actually named maybe 90%. I was on walks this week and we actually looked at that, but yesterday I have it on my clipboard over here, but I won't get that. But it actually named. So I wonder how you as school leaders in your building, or even in your district, how would you name that? I love that you brought that out. So that's, that important piece of norming with your team. And we've had conversations recently Someone, I don't know if it was, I can't remember if it was a district leader or a school leader. I don't even remember where I was, but said, well, a majority, isn't that 50% plus one? And we're like, no, that's not how I would define majority, but they're really taking it to a mathematical term. And it was like, okay, so, but are we, you know, satisfied with only 50% plus one? And then the conversation, oh, no, no, no. So in that context, how would you define majority? I love that you brought that up, Sarah. Any other noticings or considerations you all want to discuss? Or do you want to talk, how have you normed? What do you all look at as a majority?
Sorry, TNTP does have it at 85%. I have their tool.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you. I appreciate you. I couldn't remember. I was like, I just saw that yesterday.
So I actually went yesterday, I actually did some math and English IPG walkthroughs. And that was a big topic of discussion with the group that I was with is, you know, what does that majority look like? And like we, you know, during our debrief session, like, you know, we all kind of, it felt like everybody kind of had a little bit different of opinion on exactly what we were looking at. We finally were able to kind of come to a consensus, but that is definitely some wording there that if you don't have those calibration questions, you don't have that information right in front of you, or you're not familiar with that, it, you know, it could definitely cause some discussion as far as, well, you know, is simple 51% majority, or are we looking for 80-90% majority? So that's definitely something that I saw just yesterday doing this.
Oh, thanks for sharing, Cody. I love that. It sounds like through collaborative conversation, you all came to a consensus. So the discussion right there can be so rich, can it? Yeah, it really, every time I'm in discussions like that, I'm like, ooh, that's a great point. I need to add that to my toolbox. So anyone else? If not, we will move on to core action 2. So as you read through core action 2, we want to zero in on the intentionality of questions and student tasks. Take 1 minute to read and highlight those crucial components of core action 2 if you have it printed, or if you have the copy that Michael put in the chat. Just take a few minutes and annotate that for yourself. With core action 2, we're really looking at that quality of those tasks and questions that students are asked to engage with. Big picture, you're looking to see that the teacher giving the students the opportunity to demonstrate deep comprehension of the most important ideas from the text, really using those details or evidence from the text to support their thinking. And really the emphasis here is on that deep comprehension, and that's intentional. Students should be given that opportunity to demonstrate comprehension of the most important meanings, ideas, details, and language from a text, rather than just superficial recall of character names or events. Students should almost always be asked to use evidence to support their thinking, as this is that key skill called for by those college and career readiness standards. So additionally, consider intentionally, are teachers using their time wisely to spend more time on questions and responses that are most important to the overall goal of the lesson? I'm thinking about, are we preparing for those most crucial questions in the HQIM, or are we spending the majority of our time in the surface level questions? Our HQIMs, our adopted HQIMs, are designed with intentional question sequences. And sometimes when that deviation occurs, it impacts that arc of learning, and has the potential to not get to the intended purpose of the lesson and also the entire unit. You know, you've been in those classrooms where like, oh, they're dancing all around it, but we're just not getting to that. You know, we're just not getting there. I heard it said just this week, I think the teacher arrived there. I don't think the students arrived with her. So the teacher was using the questions, but were they using those really intentional teacher moves to ensure that all students had that opportunity? I'm going back to what someone put a minute ago in the chat from core action 1, that the big thing that they struggle with is we don't want to let students struggle, but that struggle, that productive struggle, is that sweet spot. So as you annotated, were there any words you wanted to talk through about that? I'm going to use an example, and then you all feel free to participate as well. So last week I was with a coach and we did walks, and she said, I want us to look for core action 2C. questions and tasks attend to the words, the academic vocabulary, phrases, and sentences within the text. She said, I want to know what that looks like. And so, because she said attend to, is that vocabulary words are posted on the board. The students have vocabulary words in their binder. The students are annotating in their text. Always, like, what does that look like? And we actually saw a moment where a teacher was, and we were in a high school classroom, and the teacher was doing the Mask of Red Death. And he called attention to mask and how it was spelled and what did it look like. And he brought them to masquerade. Why would be trying to be hot? And it was a really good attention to some vocabulary. He had done some vocabulary at the beginning that I was like, yeah, that kind of is there. But he really did attend to that and brought them closer to what his intended purpose for that lesson was by spending some time with that vocabulary with that high school students. I'd love for you all to share anything else you have, but that attend, I noticed attend is there. Questions and tasks address the text by attending to its particular qualitative features. How would you all define attending to things, attending to the qualitative features and the purpose, the meaning and purpose and language, and then attending to the vocabulary? I'll take examples or non-examples. Revisiting the vocabulary is a way to focus on it. Anyone else have anything that stood out about Core Action 2 or that you would like to share with the group?
I think B, like the questions and tasks require students to use evidence from the text. Like that's very important. And you talk about like reading. Reading is more than just literally reading. Like you have to understand what you're reading. So like having actual evidence that that's what's happening.
I really like D, where it talks about questions and tasks are sequenced to build knowledge. If we're not planning those questions ahead of time, then we're not going to be able to sequence them. So it's really hard, especially for our veteran teachers who've been doing this for a long time. And a lot of those questions come naturally to them. But there are so many teachers in the classroom now that are here. I know in our area on permits or, different types of licensure that it just doesn't come as natural to those teachers yet. And so making sure that we sit collaboratively and plan those is something that we really look for.
I love it. Thank you, Kendra, for sharing that. It is important that teachers are pushing students to actually citing evidence in the text rather to support their thinking, rather than just using recall with the read aloud. I love that. And you can tell when you're going in classrooms that some of those habits have been built in students, because even when they're having conversations peer to peer, they may say, oh, on page 33 in stanza, if they're in stanza 3 or in paragraph 3, this, and this made me think this. You can really hear that in the language of the students that's been a habit. I'm actually citing that evidence. And my goodness, I've seen that start really young in really young grades where they're like, oh, on pages, this is why this, and you can just see that expectation is there. Thank you so much, Kendra, for bringing that out. And I love, and you just what, I think it was Memberly that said that. Lucas kind of said the same thing. Those questions and tasks are sequenced to build knowledge. And if we spend that time giving teachers that gift of time to collaboratively think through and talk about and discuss, have that rich discussion about, which questions do we really want to use those high leverage teacher moves? Which question, am I going to want to have my students turn and talk and name all the characters in the story? Or am I going to use my turn and talk time or my turn and talk time to really think about how this character and this character relate to each other, getting to that intended purpose of the lesson, that I think that's so important in collaborative prep. And that is where that lives if they don't know that. I love that you brought up too, that we do have teachers on permits that may not have some of this background. Anyone else want to share any noticings or wonderings from Core Action 2?
I wonder why, which it might be under like a different strand, but why like in C, like questions and tasks attend to the words or whatever within a text, like it's not delving deeper, like it's like grade level or higher, like being more specific, that they're not asking like lower level questions.
Yeah. Asking why the specificity is not there, if it's just being surface level. Yeah. Yeah. Great point. Great point, Sarah. And I wonder, as you all norm in your teams, your school leader teams or your district teams, how that has come up. Like I said, that just came up. This was a new coach last week. And she was like, I really want to hone my eye for that. And so we just kind of talked about what we saw, what it looked like, what we want to see, what her conversations might be in her next prep session to really help them attend to. We were using that word attend. I was like, ooh, you're making me think heavily about what that means, what that truly means. How would you all define attend to? Questions and tasks, attend to the words. Like she did not feel that it was like, she said her thought was, I see that they had the vocabulary, they've marked it. I don't know that they're attending to it just because they've called out that this might be a vocabulary word. And so he's like, what is the more? What do we want to see? And we did look into her curriculum and how is that a lot, and there were some really good teacher moves in the curriculum that the teacher may not have noticed that she planned to bring back up at prep. How would you use these questions to attend to the vocabulary?
I would say when you say attend to, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Attend to is when the students are writing their sentences, that they're using that vocabulary within their paragraphs correctly. Yeah. So.
Yeah, love it. Love it. And to back up, are they using that vocabulary as they're speaking to each other before they write, as they have the conversations? I love that.
Yep.
Yeah, I love that, Tawana. Yes, I love that. Attending to, definitely. That'd be great. Yes. Anyone else? Does the teacher know and understand the purpose of the lesson? Are the questions and tasks all pushing towards the purpose of the lesson? Great conversations that we've had just recently. Anyone else want to add to?
I wanted to say, because I was thinking about the same thing, and I really feel like that intellectual prep, because if the teacher is not asking the right questions, the task won't be at the rigor. So that actually has to be something where the teacher is really thinking about that prior to. You can't just show up and then ask those questions.
Absolutely. Absolutely agree. Anyone else before we move on? So if culture is strong and our core action 1 shows our texts are at the center of that instruction and students are being given those questions and tasks that reflect those grade level expectations, then let's go ahead and consider core action 3. Remember, thinking about the tool as a hierarchy. So we have identified, really thinking about the quality of text, the tasks the students are engaged in, and we're really thinking about now who is actually doing most of the thinking in the classroom. As we think about us being in the business of teaching and learning, who is doing the learning in the classroom? And we want to see that students are owning and driving their own learning. Therefore, we are looking for those indicators to show that the students are the ones responsible for most of that cognitive lift in the classroom, that they're doing most of the thinking, talking, writing, discussing, questioning, etc. So we're going to take another minute, put my timer on for a minute, and I want you to really read and annotate core action 3. Okay, guys, what stood out to you in core action 3 as we move to this focus on student engagement? I'd love for you to come off mute and share something or put in the chat. What stands out to you in core action 3?
Well, I'll actually add something to the conversation here from one of the other sessions that I had. I can't remember if it was first 10. It's one of the Eastern regions. And I think it was even mentioned here earlier around core action 1 by somebody as well. But what they were really emphasizing was that they felt like core action 3, in terms of like getting into those higher buckets of seeing it done correctly, was actually was most difficult for them to see with educators sometimes, because at the core, an educator wants to help kids, right? And you're really having to sit out and watch productive struggle, which can be very uncomfortable, because you don't want to see the kids struggle. Like naturally, you just I think the term they use is they see the teacher want to put their cape on and fly in to save the day. But they were like, you've almost got to think of it like a muscle. How does a muscle get stronger? Only get stronger if it actually works out. And so they were just kind of emphasizing about, this is what they see as it's almost like you have to be very intentional. The teacher has to be very intentional to make sure that this is happening in their classroom.
I love it. We have that teacher heart. We want to help. Student-led, productive struggle. I love someone called out students asking questions. And then Heather, I love yours, encouraging students to talk about learning. I love that. The teacher creating the opportunity. Ooh, for productive struggle, where do teachers look when they have trouble? The teacher, peers, or the text? The teacher expecting evidence and precision. I think some questions to keep in mind when we're thinking about core action 3 is who is doing the majority of the work, the major work of the lesson, and what is that student cognitive workload? And when I think about core action 3, are the students truly engaged in those reading, writing, and speaking opportunities? You know, what does that look like when they're truly engaged? Are those teacher expectations high in regard to the student responses, including providing text evidence when answering? Is this true for all students? You know, are they answering specifically? Are they answering in complete sentences? What is that high expectation on all students? And our students, this is something that is, I don't think seen as much. Our students refining their responses based on teacher academic feedback. So when the teacher is given that feedback, how is the student taking that response, that feedback from that teacher, and refining or clarifying their responses, their learning? We wanted to get to that ownership, but at the same time, we can't say, well, it can be any answer. It can't be any answer. Like, what is our purpose? We have to keep that purpose in mind. So how are we as teachers leading them to refine those responses when they are wrong? Are we just giving them the answer, or are we actually asking those follow-up questions to help them actually refine their thinking about the topic? I think something important too about core action 3 is the yes, mostly, somewhat, not yet at the top, the box in gray, so that we see that there are two sides of that, the teachers providing the opportunities and students taking those opportunities. And then we have those words in there about many and most, for yes, and then many and some, or some and many and mostly, and then some and some for the somewhat, and then the not yet for those few or no opportunities, or students don't take those. And I would push you to think about with student engagement, we are looking at what's happening in the classroom, but as they are, as you're in walks and you're in your schools and you're in your prep, what is the student work showing as well as far as student engagement? So they may have provided those opportunities. Students may be taking those in class. Is the learning that you see evidence of happening in class, is that playing out in the student work? Are they carrying that over to the student ownership? I would just challenge you as you think about it. And I mean, I noticed this week I was with someone, and they just were, snapping some pictures of the student work to have the conversations later. Again, IPG tool is a guidance tool, not a gotcha tool. And this person had a relationship with her teachers. The teachers knew that, it was just to have the conversations later about what the teacher may or may not have seen. Would also say this, providing those opportunities for that productive struggle can be hard. And how can we support our educators to feel confident with that, to know that it's okay? Does anyone have any tips or anything they want to share about how you have really had some success with building educators' confidence in allowing that productive struggle?
I think one thing, like when I coach, when it comes to teachers, like that productive struggle is like first, like when we're planning, like thinking about, well, I coach math. But anyway, thinking about like, okay, what problem or what are they working on that'll allow the productive struggle? And then like thinking through like, okay, we know it's going to be a struggle. What misconceptions do you think they're going to have? Like what students can you like go ahead and think about who you can call on to like work through the productive struggle to where the struggle is still on them, but you're just like helping them to get there.
I love it. You're thinking about those temporary scaffolds, making my teacher heart happy. I'll share one brief example, and I'm going down to a second grade classroom I was in a couple of years ago. That particular school had the school leader and the district leader had went in and really prepped with these teachers. They were not allowing there any productive struggle with their second grade students. And so they prepped with the teacher, and she was very hesitant to allow the students to write on their own. She was really still holding all the weight of the work on herself. And so they were like, just try it. And I had been working with the district leader and school leader, and she's like, okay, well, I'm going to try it. And she said, let Miss Tanya come and let's see what else I need to do. And she was so confident that her students would not be able to do it. And they're like, but just try it. If it's a fail, we'll back up and punt. And in the moment, in the lesson, she set them up for success because she had prepped so intentionally, had thought about specific students, and really did that. And then when they started, I mean, it was immediate that the students started. They were writing. The thoughts were there. Even the things that she had been worried about in her prep that she had shared with me were just there. I mean, in the moment, she looked at me and she was like, they're doing it. They did it. And I was like, I know they did, And so it was just that her school leader saying, it's okay, try it. It may not work. And if it doesn't, we'll come back and figure out what the next step is. But it was just building her confidence to let them try, because she was so nervous. As teachers, we have that heart to want to help. And so we just really don't want that struggle, but that's the sweet spot. That's where the learning happens. So I'm gonna move over to this, since we're all over this. So really connecting those scaffolds, like she was talking about, those intentional thinking about specific students. I'll be quiet and let you read this quote. I love that it calls out the productive struggle is that sweet spot. That's what I call those aha moments. Years ago, I taught first grade, and it was like that magic when those students, when it started connecting and they started being able to just fluently get the words off the page. It was just that aha. And it didn't all happen on day 60 of first grade. It was varied, but it was that sweet spot because they had that productive struggle and it's starting to come together. They're really able to do that, those aha moments. And I love that last. But for students to become independent learners, they must learn to persist in the face of challenge. So Core Action 4 was added to the IPG in the fall of 2024. First and foremost, we realized that in our creation of the IPG as a state, we missed an important part of our values and beliefs, a focus on all students. This belief wasn't actually represented in our IPG values, and we wanted to ensure that our values and beliefs are represented in our vision and what we look for when monitoring if our vision is being realized. Thus, the creation of Core Action 4. So we realized when analyzing the state data, we saw that, overall as a trend, ELA is growing in the state of Tennessee. Our ELA data is. But we saw that not all students were growing as they should. And so then when we observed classrooms, as we go into classrooms, we noticed behaviors that were leading to subgroups of students being allowed to opt out and missing out on important instructional opportunities. So with those thoughts in mind, take 1 minute to read and annotate Core Action 4. As we started learning about the Acceleration for All initiative before last school year and started digging into the why and learning about some of the evidence and the research, one of the things that really stood out to me was a study that showed that even when our students show us, our struggling students, our economically disadvantaged students, our students with disabilities, our English language learner students show us that they can perform to this level, we still unintentionally lower the rigor as educators. It was a study. I can't even remember what article it was, but it really stood out to me that even when they show us they can perform this way, we still unintentionally lower that rigor for them. And so with Core Action 4, we're really thinking about what is that access to Tier 1 instruction, high quality Tier 1 instruction, and in ELA specifically, how are we providing that access to them for those complex texts? And how are we providing intentional targeted scaffolding that, and remember, scaffolding doesn't stay around a building forever. How are we preparing to remove those scaffolds? So I want you to take a few minutes and read this slide, and then I'm gonna let you put something in the chat that stands out to you about what makes scaffolding successful. Only when necessary. So we have to allow that productive struggle. We don't know if they can if we don't give them the opportunity. Go ahead and add something in the chat. What makes the scaffolding successful? What stands out to you? temporary. Mhm. Using what students can already do, the student assets, building to ownership and independence. If you take an asset-based mindset when you start going into your student work analysis and what could they do, it really can shift how you're thinking. Oh, they can already write a sentence. It may not be about the topic yet, but we can write a sentence, whatever it might be. I love that, thinking about their assets. Temporary, only when necessary. Yeah, exactly. So with core action 4, these are our beliefs that are aligned. Take a few minutes and think about what is, take a minute and think about these beliefs that are signaled with core action 4. You don't have to put anything in the chat, but just take a minute and think internally. How do your beliefs align with the beliefs that are aligned and are signaled in core action 4? Any thoughts you want to share here, whole group, before we move on with the beliefs? This is at the heart of our Acceleration for All initiative, really. Considering how we are providing high quality instruction for all students and holding all students to high expectations and supporting them, supporting students and teachers to get there. Okay. So great lessons are connected to solid lesson prep. As so many of you have mentioned today, it really does come back to that intentional intellectual prep. So let's take a moment and show how core action 2 of the knowledge IPG is connected to intellectual prep. So our leaders can and must help teachers know and understand the intellectual prep process. So with core action 2, the teacher uses questions and tasks to reflect the depth of textual analysis required by grade level standards and integrates these standards in the service of knowledge building, really thinking about our questions and tasks, the big bucket of core action 2. So think about what our teachers need to do, and it's already on the screen, but what they need to do to really have that play out. And so many of you have mentioned it, really having that space to plan out the questions, read the text themselves. Anything else stand out to you about really what needs to happen to prep for that unit and really get to those questions and tasks? And again, you all have mentioned it already today several times about that prep and supporting them. I think one of the questions here, how will students demonstrate their learning? I think that is a great question to happen in prep. The teacher needs a deep knowledge of the student needs, so collaboration is necessary. I love that, Carla. Thank you. Strong teaching just really requires strong preparation. So a critical part of that Acceleration for All is really engaging all educators. That's one of those key components. And really trying, one key aspect in achieving your instructional vision, Tennessee's instructional vision, is really thinking about the structures and the enabling conditions that facilitate that effective collaboration. This starts with all district leadership team members in the school building, educators being at the table to really ensure that strong tier 1 instruction for all students. And I'm sure there's some, I've been, I know you all know, and some paraprofessional is the person in the inclusion classrooms. And so how are we providing that information about the tier 1 instruction to them? I've seen some instances, some places where it is just you walk in, if you didn't know who the teacher was and who the paraprofessional was, it's such a good dynamic there. That it's not just I'm pulling kids over to a table and doing something completely separate. They truly are all immersed in tier 1 instruction. So really thinking about how can we get all educators there for all levels, all students, to provide those needs, really proactively prep for the learning needs of all students. And if we take one student and we think about those struggling students and across their day, how many different adults play a part in their day, We really need to ensure that that daily experience is cohesive across their day. So that all of those individuals are working together to really know all of those students' assets and all of those student needs that they need. Sometimes the tier 1 instruction is disconnected and not effective, and really engaging all those educators in collaboration through those HQM cycles, it has the power to shift these results. The IPG is a way to monitor that the instruction is occurring as a result of that intentional prep for all students. So we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm going to get this wrapped up in about 2 minutes, Michael, so you can have 5 minutes left at the end. So as we think about what we're doing before walks, we're going to talk about before, during, and after walks, really thinking about what you know about the materials or what your access to the materials are. Because if you don't have access to the curriculum, you may not know what the intended outcome is or the purpose is if you've not been able to be in a collaborative session and know what you're looking at. I know many have moved to unannounced walks. So if you do have those unannounced walks, how are you accessing the curriculum and accessing the scope and sequence and knowing where the teachers are supposed to be as you're going in and looking at those? And do you have a focus? Has previous feedback been given to those educators so that you can remember, oh, last time we gave feedback around core action 2. We asked the teacher, hey, let's try to ask less yes or no questions and more open-ended questions. So then you may want to look for that specific indicator that you gave that feedback around this next time to see if we're seeing improvement. So before walks, that pre-brief, just getting ourselves familiar with what it is we're supposed to be seeing, what it is we're looking for, what is our focus, and really even how is this lesson fitting into the bigger picture. So I'll be quiet and let you look at that. I believe they're getting this PowerPoint, Michael, just because I know I won't get all the way through. And then during walks, taking your note of what you see, taking note of your wonderings and even questions you might have about the lesson. And then connect those questions and noticing to those IPG indicators. Those will be so beneficial when you're doing the debriefing with the learning walk with your team, or even when you're debriefing with the teacher after the walk is complete. And there's actually, so there's not a lot of room on the IPG to walk. I take a piece of notebook paper and just have my notes. And then I do sometimes make notes on there. Some people have the great iPads that have the pen that work. I don't have one of those yet, but every time I see them, I'm like, oh, that's a really cool thing to have. And the IPG, just having that copy of the IPG to reference throughout the walks, regardless of how you determine to take notes. But I think just taking notes is an important thing to do. And then after debriefing, that rich debriefing conversation now that the learning walk is over, so that you can debrief with your team, so you can norm on some of those things we discussed. What does majority mean? What does attend mean? What are we looking for? And then where would we really want to think about how we are crafting our feedback for the teacher, that we are really naming the positives, naming all the wonderful things that our teachers are working so hard. So give them credit for all of the things they are working so hard at, and really give them those positives, and then give them a really clear one next step feedback, something that's not too broad. This could be a feedback that someone may have given you in the past, or others may have given. I know you ought to, but hey, I'd like to see better questions. That's very broad. They may not know what better questions are. So how can you, where that students are already using the text, how can you determine which question you want to spend the most time on tomorrow? What is the most crucial question? Giving them something really specific that they could use that week. For, the example I gave earlier, noticing that the teacher is only ever asking yes or no questions. Tomorrow, I'd love for you to ask 3 open-ended questions. How does that feel? Or how might you ask, more open-ended questions and less yes/no questions, whatever it is. You really want to give that actionable next steps to the teacher to really shift that instruction for the students that are behind those. And I don't think, So again, there's also a district work with, a coach was talking about some feedback she had crafted to give the teacher. And then she said, oh, and then for my sneaky prep, this is what I'm going to do. And I said, well, what's your sneaky prep? And she said, well, it's just my reminder that when I'm with this fifth grade group, I really want to hone in on this part of the prep protocol. It's not individual teacher feedback, but it's, oh, when I'm with this group, I want to make sure we're really talking about questioning, because I noticed maybe the questioning wasn't as rigorous as it should be, whatever it might be. So how does that intellectual prep impact and drive those high academic expectations? And I'm going to say that intellectual prep, when you bring them together with student work, you can really see how the expectations may vary. So you can get closer to high expectations for everyone. This is just talking about some of the different roles and the ways the IPG can be used. And then we did not get to the foundational skills instructional practice guide, but there are some learning opportunities on Best for All Central that I'm sure Michael will share with you. So